Hello.
Hi, I'm Jill Johns.
I'm Anita Brown.
And you are listening to the Pause Button 2.0.
Yes, we're here to upgrade your self-care.
We sure are. We're in the sun again.
Yeah, a little bit squinty still.
That's
going down.
It is. We're cozy and comfy.
Mm-hmm.
Exhale.
Oh, so, how are you?
I'm good.
I'm good, too.
You know what I find is that this is like the bright spot of my week.
Is it?
I really look forward to having these conversations.
I'm feeling better and better. I mean, not like I didn't before, but I'm feeling more comfortable having the conversations on, like, recorded.
Mm-hmm. That part is scary.
That part is really scary.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate these conversations
Me
we're
too.
having.
I'm enjoying it.
So today we're going to talk about marriages, right? Boundaries in marriages.
Tune in.
This is like a really vulnerable one.
Yeah. I think we're both a little bit nervous. One, because we want to honor our spouse. Like, I don't think in any of the conversations that we have that we ever want to feel like we're throwing somebody under the bus. But because we're humans engaging with other humans, it involves having conversations about other humans. So I know in the past I've talked about, my mom, my dad, my kids, my mother-in-law, like other people. But this conversation about talking about my marriage and my spouse is, it's intimate. It's personal.
And it's like a still ongoing thing. And some of the other conversations we've had have been about things that are done. Things complete. That are done. And it's kind of easier to talk about this.
Well, we have a pact that we won't talk about things that aren't complete. Yep. So the fact that we're breaking that pact by talking about our ongoing marriage is proof that, never make a rule.
Never make a rule because you're going to break it. All right. So what is on your mind with this conversation?
I think what we want to talk about a little bit is, so we've had conversations about boundaries, and we've had conversations about saying no. We've had conversations about being in a different place on the emotional guidance scale with the people that we live with. And we've talked about that each one of us is on an independent journey in order to upgrade our self-care. And what does that look like when you're living under the same roof as another person who may or may not be in the same place as you?
And how has that evolved? Because we've been married. I've been married 20 years next year.
And I was married the first time for almost 7 years. And I've been in a partnered relationship for 14, 8 of which has been actually married. So, I've spent as well the last 25 years of my life in an intimate relationship with another human being. So I have a lot of anecdotes.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot on our journey, and a lot of changes and shifting, and so, all right, where do you want to start with it?
By exhaling, I think.
Start with an exhale.
Let's start with an exhale. So I'll start with, So my first marriage, I didn't know anything about boundaries. I was just on autopilot, just trying, I was young. I got married at 22, didn't have much of a skill set, I would say, for self-care for myself, much less for trying to interact with another human being. And then it was in that marriage that I brought, my first 2 children into the world. So, 4 people trying to figure this thing out. And, it ended with a divorce, so obviously we didn't figure it out, right? We didn't figure out how to have boundaries and how to be safe and how to be helpful and how to stay committed to one another. And so I think what I've learned from that, I've had the opportunity to bring forward into this second marriage that I'm in. So it's been really good and really nice to kind of have that as an example of like, oh, here's what not to do. But then I also know that within the construct of this marriage, we've, had to have some come to Jesus moments as well. So, for me, it's that, and I think yours is different from when we were talking about it off camera, is that you've gone through a lot of those similar experiences, but with the continuity of the same spouse. And so I'm impressed by your ability to like, oh yeah, I went through that kind of crap, but like that marriage didn't last, right? And you've gone through a lot of similar stuff, but your marriage has lasted and has shifted into a new personality or whatever. So I think that's what I want to talk about. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about you.
Oh, no. We're talking about me again?
Yeah.
Didn't we do that in episode 7?
Oh, we talked about both of us.
Well, you know, I got to say that I got to put my sweater on now because I'm getting a little bit chilly. Yeah. You know, the reason why my marriage has lasted is because, you know, I kind of feel like I got to a point where I was like, I'm done with this. And then he was like, well, me too. And, but then we were both kind of like, but not really. Right. But not really. We really kind of feel like we are, but maybe not. Mm-hmm. Maybe we just take a little time and we'll do something. Then I kind of feel like I dug into my shit and brought about some changes within myself, but then, and he didn't. So like I went to therapy for me and learned some skills that I hadn't had. And he didn't. Like he didn't do any work like that on his own. But I would bring home like, hey, in therapy, this is what we talked about. This is what it came up and whatever. And he would kind of process that internally within himself. Like, well, yeah, can I relate to that? Does that experience relate to my childhood? And would that apply to me? And so in a way he did do some work.
Got therapy as an aside.
Yes. And I told my therapist that like, basically she's done therapy to me, but then also my husband, my mom, like some other people. So me changing my boundaries, he was like a willing participant. And if he wasn't, I probably wouldn't still be married, you know? So, I guess like he and I both decided to change things. It wasn't I changed things and then I'm still married. It's like we both decided to change things, and that's why we're still married. So, do you want to talk about you yet?
No, no. You know, so I think about for my first marriage, I was doing that pleading, like, can we please change? Can we do something different? It's not quite right. This isn't working for us. Like, I remember printing off something that was like Dr. Phil's top checklist of like how to talk to people and treat people. And I remember like printing that off and like slapping it on the refrigerator. Like, this is how we're supposed to behave with each other. And see, I'm behaving this way and you're not. And so I wholeheartedly agree with that, like, willing participant thing. Is that what it felt like for me in my first marriage was that I wanted us to work on it, and that he wasn't necessarily taking it as seriously as I was like pleading, like, can we please work on this? But I didn't go to therapy alone, you know, which in hindsight, maybe that's what I should have done. And that, you know, our marriage ended then. What's been different with my current husband is that when I have said we need to do something different, he has agreed and said, let's do it together. So that's what I'm hearing in my story that's similar to yours, is that there was a willingness for both participants to want something different. You know, it's like...
and to be actively working on, like...
And trying.
Changing responses, changing... initiating, changing the way you communicate, changing the way you fight, changing the way... you handle each other's emotions is changed.
I agree.
Yeah.
Changing the way we fight has been probably the most important piece, because I do believe that we're not always going to agree on everything 100% of the time. It's part of what makes it exciting, right? Like, we've got differing opinions and different beliefs and different backgrounds, but it's having a constructive way to be able to bring, because, you know, so yelling, screaming, throwing things, punching things, flipping things, some of which I participated in, some things I've observed and some things I've heard from other couples, probably feel good for that split second as far as releasing that energy, but doesn't do much constructive good for the relationship. But knowing that people have anger and rage and whatever is also okay. So it's not about saying you're not allowed to be angry or you're not allowed to be frustrated, but it's in the physical manifestation of what you do with that energy that I think is important to work on.
I think so. There's kind of like this before and after in my marriage. And really it was like, before is basically I went to therapy in 2017. And so, and we got married in 99. So like, that was like our before. And then basically our after is from 2017 until now. So our after is not that long.
Shorter. Yeah. Shorter proof.
So our before was this really long period of time. Like I got married also young, 23. And Scott is much older. And so he kind of had like this established, like, this is who he is. This is how he is. And I was kind of this young, I don't even think I'm allowed to be, having any sort of emotions. I don't think I'm allowed to express them. And he was this, here's my emotions. Here's all of them. Here's exactly how I feel and everything. And I'm allowed to, and I can say it however I want. And I was not that way. And I also kind of felt like, well, he is allowed to say whatever he wants. This is his feelings. And I have to listen to them. I have to accept them. I have to, just like basically allow them or whatever. And I don't think he expressed himself in a nice way.
Right?
Didn't sound nice. His anger sounded really scary to me. His voice, he would yell and his voice would raise. Like when you're kind of feeling overweight anyway, your voice is going to raise and you're having
intensify.
And so when his would do that and he's deeper, it would sound scary. And, and then we did have this drinking component to our marriage. And so that added some elements that that were kind of extra scary. And and then there were periods when there would be kind of like a certain amount of violence, like, slamming cabinets while we're talking, or, me slamming the dishwasher. I really mean that, and slamming the dishwasher, or sweeping things off a counter, or flipping over a chair or a table, a little side table. And that shit's scary.
Yeah, right?
To me, that's scary stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in a house like that. It's like I grew up with spankings, but I didn't grow up with yelling. Parents, like, I don't even think they fought in front of me ever, or like disagreed.
Right. My parents didn't either. They still don't.
And it really kind of was like, however dad was feeling or whatever, like that's the feeling. And so we all, accommodate and orbit around dad's emotion or whatever. And so I don't even know where I was going with this. Basically, like, that was our before. Me and Scott, that was our before. And then it got to this point of like, I'm done with that. Like, I don't need that anymore. And so our new way is not really yelling, like there's really not yelling anymore. And there's definitely not, we don't drink anymore. So there's not this extra,
wild component.
Yeah. And slamming and whatever. There's not that anymore.
But you still don't always agree.
No, we don't always agree.
And sometimes you're angry.
And we have angry voices. And my old way would have been to completely shut down and ignore him, or just. And he would see that as like, I don't give a shit. Yeah, I would stonewall. He would see that as like, I don't give a shit about him or about our marriage. And I would be interpreting him as like, he doesn't give a shit about me because he's yelling.
Right.
And so we both kind of have this feeling, but we're not really talking about it. So now we are persistent of talking. So.
Good. And it feels better?
Yeah, it does feel better.
And it sounds to me like it feels safer.
It feels safer, but I also, it feels safer, him, like his, whatever he presents feels safer, but also I feel stronger because I feel like I am allowed to have my emotions. I can say them and I can respectfully say them and I don't have to change them. Like, I'm just allowed that. That was a really huge thing for me, to just be like, I'm allowed my emotions and I can say what they are.
Yeah, we're working on that in our house too. I think we alluded to it in an earlier podcast, but I have a much wider expressed emotional bandwidth than my husband. I think he has the exact same emotional bandwidth. He just doesn't express it as much. And so I am learning to express all of it and in ways that I feel good about expressing it so that I can look in the mirror and feel good about myself afterwards versus, cringeworthy, which is how I would feel previously, I guess. Like, ooh, why did I say that? Why did I do that? I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. I don't have that as much now.
How did you go from being like a yeller or a slam, whatever you did before? How did you go from that to, I guess, calmer or whatever it is now?
Well, so part of it was the dynamic. I mean, I think, so my first husband and I together, the dynamic made it so that we were explosive together. My dynamic with Ken is that if I'm bringing explosivity, he's not responding to it. And so his reaction time is a lot longer, and it's not that initial like explosiveness right out of the get-go or whatever. But more than anything is that learning how, so if I think about what's different about our disagreements now is that Ken and I, after kind of our last big blow up, which happened about a year and a half ago, we had this real like heart-centered conversation that we aren't leaving each other. And so I think what was happening before that, so he came from parents that were divorced. We both are divorced from our first marriages. And so we were kind of in this relationship, like, and we don't have children together. We don't combine our bank accounts. We're like two grown humans that brought families with us, and we just kind of like are magneted together. We're like stuck together, but it always kind of felt like at any given point in time, we could unmagnet ourselves. Like I still own my house from before, and we were living in his house. So it's like, there was always in the back of my mind, like, oh, well, when this doesn't work out, like, it'll be really easy. I'll just move back into my old house.
You had your divorce house already.
Yeah, already. Like, our bank accounts were separate. Like, I don't know any, like, we are very separated.
Yeah.
And so when we would fight, it wasn't necessarily about the anger or the explosivity. It was more about the, like, subtly implied, like, is this going to be the argument that's the straw that breaks the camel's back? And now we're going to be, like, I'm going to be divorced twice.
Yeah.
And so whenever it was, last year before, we had a real conversation that, like, I do not ever want to get divorced from him. Like, I'm in this for the long haul. Like, he's the person that I want to grow old and gray with. Like, I joke, I'm like, I'm going to be the one that's like bringing you your cane, and you're going to be the one like reminding us of, remember the good old days kind of thing. And so I think once we had that real, it was an intense, long, ongoing conversation about the fact that we are not gonna divorce over a disagreement on something, it completely changed the way that we disagreed. And so it's, for me anyway, the weight has lifted off my shoulders. Like, I'm not looking over my shoulder all the time thinking, oh, is this going to be the one where now he thinks I'm too much of a bitch? Or is this going to be the one where it's like, whatever this topic is the thing that shuts him down indefinitely or whatever. And so because of that, like, and it's different. It's like when we got married, yes, we said those things in the wedding, but it was like we had to actually have that feeling. And so now it feels different. So now I'm not afraid that if we get in an argument or something happens or whatever, that unmagnetizing is going to happen.
We had a similar process. Like, we had to actually remember, like, hey, we're not going to get divorced. Like, but there was, so like maybe like for maybe the first 10 years or 7 years or something like that, it was maybe the first 10, because first 10, we didn't really talk about divorce. And then there was a period of time where we started saying it more, like, well, what, do you want to get divorced? Like, what do you want out of this marriage? Or, kind of like just throwing it out there, like,
lobbing it.
Do you want to? And it's kind of, and then after a while, it was like, I started taking the question serious, and he's like, maybe taking this serious, like, well, do I? I kind of feel like I do kind of want out of this. So then there was like maybe a span of years where divorce was brought up more, or it was considered more. And then there was, maybe a 3-year span where it was like every 6 months, it was like I think that we're done.
This is it.
Yeah, I think that we're done. And we would start having conversations of like, if this is, you know, are you done? I'm like, I feel done. Do you feel done? I feel done too. Okay, you know, what would that look like? How are we gonna
logistics conversations?
Yeah, exactly.
Start
we started having those conversations.
Who gets the couch? Who gets the car?
Where would who would move out? You know, how would we arrange the kids? And we started having those conversations. And so every fight would end up with the logistics conversation, and then with the therapy, like it was kind of like I went to therapy at this moment when I was like, I am absolutely done. Like, I seriously don't think this is salvageable. Like, I don't even respect who you are. And he was feeling a similar thing about me. And but then I was letting him know that, like, look, I'm going to therapy for me, and it's either going to help our marriage or it's going to help me feel okay with our marriage ending. And but I let him know that, like, what I would rather it do is change me so that I have a better marriage. And also I'd like you to change as well. And so during that year, we did still have our moments of having some really funky conversations and arguments, but less and less. We didn't end it. It wasn't like an argument ending in logistics of how are we going to arrange our life now that we're going to get divorced. And then we did have a conversation where we just suddenly were so vulnerable with each other. I mean, I think we both ended up basically crying. Yeah. Of like, we don't want this to end. Like, so we have to stop having the conversations end in like, how are we going to arrange our life now we're going to get divorced because we had an argument about the electric bill or something, you know? So we did have a similar thing. Now it's not, we both feel now it's not a matter of we're having an argument and it's probably going to, you know, end in me looking for an apartment, you know?
Right.
So it is.
It's nice to take that off the table.
It is. It really is.
There was a post on Facebook that I was reading the other day where it was like, you know, do you feel that divorce is an option? So this isn't the like anti-divorce conversation, I don't think, but for me, having experienced both, like experiencing a marriage that ended in divorce and then experiencing a marriage that has had multiple opportunities to potentially end in divorce, and us concretely dedicating ourselves to each other saying, you know what, no, we're not going to end in divorce, is radically different from an emotional experience and from navigating through this journey of life with another person. So it's like some of these other conversations that we've had about, like, you know, their emotions is none of my business. Part of it is it's none of my business now because it's like, you know what, he's going to figure his shit out and we're going to be fine. Where before, when it was my business, it was because I was worried that his anger was going to result in us getting divorced. And so now it's like, it's easier for me, even in my inner circle, to have his emotions and feelings be none of my business because it is the long haul journey. And it's like, he's not going to be mad forever, or he's not going to go through this funk forever. And even if it is Ken went through a 5-year funk, right? And it's like, it's different when you have the 50-year view of the relationship versus the day-to-day view of the relationship. That's what shifted the most for me, is like, you know, what he and I have talked about is like, we're going to be in our 80s and we're going to turn back and look at the whole timeline of our marriage together. Like, we can do it already now. Like, when we got together, Mason was 1, Zoe was 1.5, Zach was 4, Braxton was 7. And now that our kids are, you know, 21, 18, 15, 14, we look back at that chapter and go, holy shit, that was so hard. Like, we had a 1-year-old and an 18-month-old and, you know, these 2 kids in elementary, like, that was hard. So, like, for me, part of the long game in the relationship is that, wow, when we're going to be 80, hopefully, and turning around and looking back at it, we're going to be looking at a ton of different chapters, some that were like really beautiful and wonderful and perfect, and some that were really fucking hard. And that's really, really pleasant for me to, like, kind of like settle into. It feels good.
Yeah, if my marriage feels good to me now, but I agree with you. Like, I'm not anti-divorce because I think that in some cases divorce really is necessary.
I agree.
and maybe both people blossom, and especially even when there's kids involved. I mean, I think that at some point, divorce is necessary so that the kids don't see that relationships just suck.
That was the impetus. I mean, so Zoe was little. Zoe was, 15 months up to 18 months when it got really bad for me in my marriage. And she was little. Like, I joke, I used to say, she's 4 apples tall or whatever. And she was feeling the angst in our home, and I, for me, the message more than anything was like, I really just don't want my kids to be around this kind of tension and anger. Like, and again, not going into the specifics or anything, but it's like, it was the best thing for me. It was the best thing for my kids. It was the best thing for my healing and my journey, my self-care. Like, I have zero regrets whatsoever about getting divorced. But I am pulling forward the lessons that I learned from that marriage into the marriage that I'm in now to make sure that this marriage, is healthier. It has self-care for me at the center point of it.
And Ken's got his eye on his own self-care.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, both people have to be in tune with something within themselves in order to be able to, I guess, be with each other.
Well, and we, when the shit hit the fan between Ken and me last year, I was already well on my self-care journey, and he hadn't technically started his yet, or at least started what he's currently on right now as a self-care path. Like, I'd been listening to Abraham Hicks for years and years. I'd been doing a lot of the work. I'd already started a pretty robust self-care journey. So when our shit hit the fan, I didn't react to the shit the way that he expected me to react to the shit, and it surprised him. He was like, wait a minute, that's not the reaction I was expecting to get from you. And then it was kind of like the When Harry Met Sally moment when he was like, what are you doing? Like, why did I just tell you this totally shitty thing and you're not reacting at all frustrated? And my response to him was like, because I've done all this work. And so then he started doing the whole, and I said to him, I said, I really feel like if you want to understand who I am at the core of me now, you need to be familiar with some of these other thought leaders that I follow, because they really are setting the stage for who I am and how I respond to life. And so I started feeding him, links and texts and whatever to some of the stuff that I'd been listening to. And eventually he infiltrated some of that into his own self-care practice. And it's really been the best thing for our marriage has been the fact that we have this common language for our, for navigating through all of this. And we don't have the religious side of it. I think other people, it seems like, may get that through their churches or some different groups or whatever. And so this is kind of like our blueprint of how we want to be married. And it's been really helpful. But it's, we weren't there at the same time.
Yeah, I was just, when you were saying that, I was thinking, Scott and I think started at the same time, because it started at this point of like, we're done. We're really absolutely
I'm going
done.
to therapy.
Yeah. And then it was like, well, but let's just see what this does. And it ended up changing our own, how we think, how we communicate, how we accept ourselves, and then how we accept each other. Because Scott and I are actually really, really different when it comes to, I guess, just some of our beliefs are very different. And I guess, I don't really feel like I need him to, I don't feel like I need him to have that common thing. I need him to respect me. So the boundary is, I just need him to respect me. And he needs me to respect him in our differences. And so that's working for us as long as we respect each other. And then I guess there would be some aspects that we do have commonality on in some of our beliefs, or else, I guess it would be really weird to be married to somebody completely different or something. But
and even for how different our backgrounds were and our upbringings and just all of the points in life that got us to have our paths cross, we probably couldn't be more dichotomous from each other. But it's been a really good, having the bad things happen in order to be able to create this newness has actually like been welcome change, you know? So it hasn't been something to regret. Oh, look, we have an airplane now.
And the sun keeps kind of like poking in and out of the trees.
Yeah, that's nice.
A nice little. So what I'm hearing is we talked about having like kind of like no boundaries in the marriage, or and how destructive that can be.
It was.
And incorporating some of that none of my business type of thing to create boundaries. And then how marriages are when there's those boundaries in place.
Yeah.
Is that what we talked about?
I think so. I think it's and the emotional piece, right? Like people being at a different spot on the scale at different times, and that's okay. You feel okay about this one?
Yeah, I do feel okay about it. I feel like our off-camera conversation was like, I don't know, I just feel like it went a little, something else was going on in our off-camera conversation that didn't happen.
What do you think it was? Can we pull it out?
I don't know if we can pull it out. I mean, I think we talked about it. It just seemed like it was really a rolling off the tongue and kind of this bouncing back and forth type of thing, where I think we got there in this conversation. It just wasn't as this like ebb and flow, and there it goes.
Well, and I think it goes, we've talked about this a lot off camera, but it's like once the camera turns on, it gets scary.
It's like,
oh God, like, what if I say the wrong thing? And what if what I say pisses somebody off? And we talked a lot about like our spouses know that we're talking about them, but we really try to honor them and not throw anybody under the bus or say anything, that they wouldn't feel comfortable with. But, some of the stuff we talk about on camera, we're not quite ready to talk off camera. We're not quite ready to talk about on camera yet.
Yeah. So I think, so the off camera conversation, I feel like some of the gold nugget of what I was hearing was that marriages can sometimes feel like they suck because of the emotions that are expressed, and I think it comes down to like what are we going to allow the other person to throw at us physically or
emotionally.
Yeah, or emotionally. And once we put boundaries in place and honor them, and if the other person is willing to honor those boundaries, and then also kind of incorporate some of those self-care techniques for themselves, that marriages can change. Yeah. And so,
I really like my marriage now.
I really do too. Like, he's just he's the first person I want to talk to about anything, and he always has been. But now I feel like even if he's not going to agree with it, like I can still have it. Yeah. And we're not going to get divorced. Right. Yeah, Ken's definitely my person. Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, thanks for that conversation.